Before we start, I would like to ask your help to do two things. First, tell a friend or two who you think might like the show. And second, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The more reviews the show gets, the more likely it will even appear in search results. Thank you, and now on to the show.
They make the trek out to Burning Man for a week and a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the Shadow of the Man Show. I'm your host, Andy. The clown? That Andy? Today, our guest is Kim Cook. And so, Kim, you just retired for being, was it the Senior Director of Global Activation? Was that your title?
Yes.
So what exactly is Global Activation? What was your job? You did that for 10 years, right?
Well, I did 3 jobs at Burning Man. I was the Director of Art and Civic Engagement for the first 4 years. Then I was the Director of Creative Initiatives for another 4 years. And then 2 years as the Senior Director Global Activation. Global Activation really is almost like a placeholder to speak to the thing that moves me greatly, which is how Burning Man filters out into the world and sort of intersects with other contexts in ways that are organic and meaningful on both sides. So, the words are almost arbitrary. You could say activation, you could say engagement, you could say, you know, joyful friendship, right? It's like it's this matter of um, really connecting and understanding that while Black Rock City is emblematically and symbolically important to many, and for many, that's it. Like you do that, and that's Burning Man to them. But in many other ways, what it represents and what people have learned in 40 years of going to the desert has meaning and applicability across the world. And in some cases, that's networks of that are officially connected to Burning Man Project, the regional contact system, the regional event leads, Burners Without Borders. Then there's some that I would still call networks, even though it's maybe not officially referred to that way, but theme camp leaders, mutant vehicle creators, artists, rangers, so there really it is a global system of networked people who are connected by this idea of Burning Man, which probably means something different to everybody, but universally represents a sort of freedom of expression and a desire to engage constructively within community. And so my job was to interface there, right? So whether that was the European Leadership Summit and the regional contacts there, or Burners Without Borders, or partnerships with the Smithsonian or Chatsworth House or the United States Institute of Peace. And then on Playa, since 2019, I've been art directing the Man. So the way that the pavilion is developed and the art activation and a sense of place, benches, lights, that kind of stuff, that's been me and a bunch of other people who care fiercely and ferociously about it and were kind enough to give me room to play with them.
So the Man, the pavilion, I mean, is that with an eye towards like the connection to like the outside world too, or is it just kind of like,
No, I
oh,
think because I came in many ways as the most senior art person,
Hmm.
and when we lost Larry in 2018, Larry Harvey had been exclusively working with people he loved and trusted to collaborate and develop the theme and to develop the experience at the Man each year. So after he was gone, we had the wonderful Stuart Mangrum writing the theme, and many of the same people that had worked with Larry, but Larry had really, sort of ruled by fiat in terms of what it was he wanted the man to be. And so we got together, Marion, the CEO, and a number of the founders, and Opa, who you may have known, and who we
Yeah.
lost,
Just
Jack.
passed recently, right? Yeah.
Mhm. And we talked about an approach that we ended up deciding would be comprised of a group of artists designing concepts and then all of us deciding together which concept to develop and build. And so I have been putting together the list of artists that we would ask in discussion with many other people, including Katie Hazard from the art department and people who are sort of formed a stakeholder group, and then sort of take it and run with it from there and make it into a fully realized experience. So I just got lucky in a way because first I was the director of art and civic engagement, then I was the director of creative initiatives, and that's when I started working on the Man really at the very end of when I was the director of art and civic engagement, and I just held it after that. So even though
Hmm.
my job changed that piece, because when I started, I was in charge of all art, all fire, all pyro, everything on Playa, and a bunch of other stuff too, and community events and grant making and Burners Without Borders and the regional network and so on and so on. And
Huh.
so it, I didn't want to lose an authentic connection to the heart of the city and the I didn't just want to be a hanger on Playa, right? I wanted to have a work function and to be a part of a team, and the honor and opportunity to continue to work on the Man with people who are passionately committed to their much longer than mine history,
Hmm.
30 years or more in most cases. So in some ways, I was the art director, and in other ways, I was really more a facilitator of a group of people who all cared deeply about the end result.
So how did this all begin? I mean, like, did you just get into Burning Man? It's like, well, okay, now I'm the art director. I mean, like, what was the first year? Like, what was your first experience of Burning Man? Like, and how did you?
My first experience of Burning Man depends on where you start the clock and what you call an experience of Burning Man. So if you
Sure.
think Black Rock City is Burning Man,
Eh.
then there's one story. But I would say my first experience of Burning Man is that I'm a Bay Area native, and
Hmm.
Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco. And I was running a theater in San Francisco in the late 90s, and it didn't have any air conditioning. It was like an old warehouse space. And
Uh-huh.
so in the summer, we couldn't really do a whole lot, but we had big space. And so people could build big art there. So, I had burners making art in that theater
What was
in
the
the
theater?
90s, huh?
What was the name of the theater?
Arto.
Oh, okay.
And I had a board member who went out to Burning Man, and he came back and he's like, I spent the week on a trailer with a fig leaf and it was awesome. You should come. And I was like,
Sounds
okay.
enticing.
Just my
And
thing.
this was
Yeah,
like
and
late 90s, you said?
yeah, mid late 90s. And I got clean and sober in 1988. So I was a
Mm-hmm.
little alarmed about that thing in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And then I lived across country in Philly and New Orleans, Washington, D.C. So I wasn't as near to it. I kind of figured I would go at some point. I like to say it's like you have, relatives that have a family reunion that eventually you're going to go to, and I had the guy who was my hairstylist in Philadelphia, Sorrell. He and his husband would come out to California every year, buy a janky car, go to Burning Man with their friends. When I was in New Orleans, I started a festival called Lunafet, Light Up NOLA Arts, and all the burners came out. And then they all wanted to meet me because it spoke to the kinds of things that Burning Man. And so then the next year I had a Burning Man artist named Jen Lewin there, who is just an incredible artist and friend. So then, so I was the president of the Arts Council for the city of New Orleans, and both of my parents died within about 8 months of each other, and I I had expected that my dad would die while I was in New Orleans. I had not anticipated that my mom would die.
Mm.
And I just felt really like I needed to come home. And I wrote a few friends and I said, it's time for me to come home. I wrote to Mark Bamuti Joseph, who was working at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts at the time. I wrote to my friend Sarah Kroll, who was at Destiny Art Center. And I wrote to my friend Garfield Bird, who was the CFO of Wikimedia Foundation. And Garfield sent me the job description for Burning Man, Director of Art and Civic Engagement. And he said, I was holding on to this. I knew there was somebody that I should send this to. And so he sent it to me. And I was like, wow, they have like an office, Burning Man. And it said that you had to be a burner to be eligible to apply. But I went ahead and applied, and the recruiter interviewed me, and I made the case like, that I was Burning Man adjacent for a long time, and
Yeah.
that the same community that birthed Burning Man had birthed me creatively, and that I was always surrounded by Burning Man. And in fact, I was informed in a way that a burner may not be about the impact that Burning Man was having in the world and what it had to
Yeah.
offer the world.
Unique experience there. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you interview at Burning Man, you have to do a lot of interviewing. Now, one of the things I did was I flew myself out to the Bay Area without telling them that I was doing it in order to meet them, but just saying to the recruiter, I was like, hey, I'm going to be in the Bay if anybody wants to see me, because I wanted to overcome the hurdle of flying me in to interview.
Yeah.
And so that got me my first round of interview. I mean, I'm not sure what got me my first, but that's when I did my first round of interviews. And I will tell you, it was on my birthday, August 6th, and I had done the weekend before a chakra clearing retreat, and I got really sick. So apparently I had a bunch of toxins in my chakras. I could barely crawl across the floor. So when I went for that first round of interviews, which was kind of an all-day thing, I hired a car. This is kind of Lyft and Uber weren't that big a thing back then, just even 10 years, 11 years ago. And I paid for the car to wait for me outside. And then, so
You didn't
drove
think it
me.
was going to be that long?
No, I just knew that I was really weak.
Oh,
Yeah. And then when I got done and back to the hotel, like they wheelchaired me back to my room. So I
wow.
was very committed. So, anyways, that got me through the first round. And then there was, I think, another round. And then I had to come to Playa. So, my first experience of Burning Man that we think of as Burning Man was 4 days on Playa as a job interview.
What? So what year was this that you were like applying, and then
2015.
2015, and that was the first year we went to Burning Man too?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. And I mean to tell you, asking yourself the question when you're in New Orleans of like, what do you wear for a job interview at Burning Man? At Burning Man,
Wow. Anything you want or nothing at all, right?
right? And I mean, fortunately, New Orleans is a costuming kind of town. So
Yeah.
I
They
had,
might tell you that you're overdressed.
no, I didn't do overdress. I did kind of like plaid pants, but big jewelry.
I'm trying to think. It's like, what would be an inappropriate job interview attire on the playa? like khakis and a polo, you know,
right?
like a suit. You know?
No, I guess unless you really did it, ironically.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because like what you're talking about, like this whole experience of being a burner. I just had on a couple of weeks ago, Debbie Mansour, and so she's from like back east. Like, she works with helps out with like the portal, cosmic burn, stuff like that. And so one of the parts of my show is that, like is the whole concept of like what is a burner anyway, you know. Like so like as I was talking about that show, like in 1990 when there was like 80 people first went to the playa, literally quite literally like 100% of them came from San Francisco, right? Just definitionally, like, and then like over years as more people came and people came from farther and farther away, it's just like, well, okay, now people coming from, and then so now like there's regionals all over the planet, right? So my main question is like if you've been to some like a regional burn for like 8 years, then you go to the playa for 3 years, it's like, are you like an 11-year burner? And
Oh, for sure.
yeah, right. And then there's like another question is like the whole like the VR thing, which is like, well, I've been doing like BlackRock VR for a couple like, I mean, it can kind of like start going down this road. It's like, what exactly does it mean to be, I mean, a burner, like in the Burning Man culture? And I mean, I could understand for like applying for like a job for Burning Man, that like an art director job. I mean, maybe DPW. I mean, not no shade on DPW or something, but it's like they probably want someone with direct experience of Black Rock City.
I think
Like,
it really depends. And,
yeah,
um, so I was never actually the art director of Burning Man. I had those
mhm.
other titles that I've said before, and I
Yeah.
worked on the man. But the, in the years I've been employing people to report to me, whether as a, CEO or executive director or as a program leader, there's something to be said for experience, and then there's something to be said for the quality of the person, where it doesn't really matter what you need them to do because they can bring whatever you need to the table and you can train them the rest. So, for example, when I was the president of the Arts Council for the city of New Orleans and I needed a deputy director, I outlined what I needed: somebody with grant writing experience, somebody with operational experience, somebody with budgeting. And then I met this guy named Nick Stillman, who was a sports writer and an art critic for a New York magazine, and a sports critic in New Orleans. And he had also taught art history at a local college. I think it was at the University of New Orleans. And I met him through his wife, who's a curator and a really wonderful person, his wife at the time. He's also now married to a different extremely wonderful woman that I know. And she was like, just, could you meet my husband? He's looking for work. And I met Nick, and I knew in an instant, even though he'd never written a grant, even though he had not done budgets, that he didn't look like what I thought I wanted. I knew he was the right person. And I
Mhm.
knew it from certain things. Like he said, he couldn't abide a pile of paper in a corner. And the way I inherited the Arts Council is we had a lot of corners with papers and various excess in them. He
Mhm.
said that, and then because I was new and that there were people there who had been there for a long time, I could tell that Nick could enter the culture of that office without feeling threatening to people, and that people would want to work with him. And so it was really the qualities of Nick as a human, not the things that I officially wanted him to have or be. And I think we've seen that at Burning Man too, where there are people who just belong as a part of our world, and the what they've whether they were burners before or not, they sort of are burners, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and then do you mind if I take this in a related direction to what you were
Wherever you
talking
want.
about?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So in 2020, we have the pandemic, and by the end of that year, Harley K. Dubois and Marion Goodell had been in conversations with Sotheby's. Basically, their board member, Fab Five Freddy, had gone over to Sotheby's and said, "You guys do charitable auctions. You should do one for Burning Man because, we were burning through our reserves to retain the staff and the practice, which was very smart because it's a very particular set of skills that people have that,
Hmm.
Marion was clear she wanted to keep them employed. And so I got handed the role of producer curator for this auction with Sotheby's. Now, a lot of people had a lot of mixed feelings about Sotheby's big exclusive brand, what they mean and represent in the world. And we had just witnessed the, murder of George Floyd and the uprising in the streets.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, if we're going to do an auction with Sotheby's, then it has to be anti-racist, right? And we have to be clear about an inclusive and extensive reach. Burning Man does not classically have a lot of artists of color, nor does it actually have, in many ways, a lot of women. Like some of our best known artists are predominantly men, although we have excellent women artists, and I could rattle off names for
Oh
10
yeah.
minutes probably. So, with that intention, I needed to go beyond what someone would think of as a Burning Man artist, someone in Black Rock City, or I wasn't going to have a well balanced portfolio of artists. And so we ended up with 164 artists, 49% women, 49% artists of the global South, artists of color,
Wow.
and many of whom had never been to Playa. So the way I applied this idea of are you a burner is were you living in a way that was authentic to the principles and ethos of Burning Man? And what I found in artists from Mexico, artists from Lebanon, artists from East Africa, South Africa, is that they absolutely knew what Burning Man was, but they didn't have the ability to secure the visas, the plane tickets, the tickets to Burning Man, and other things. So it was emblematic of something about freedom and personal expression to them that was deeply symbolically meaningful. And
Hmm.
for me, that qualified them as burners, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe quasi burners, maybe not to a burner who really has been going to the Black Rock Desert forever and ever. But in terms of the definition for this, you know, this experience, and we had 164 artists, as I mentioned, and we, funneled about $900,000 out to this artist. And Sotheby's keeps the auction of all the artists who sold. They take down the ones who didn't sell, but permanently. So all those artists, most of them, like 90% of them, had never been sold in that kind of setting. So it gave them like a
Oh.
new credential. And I got a lot of letters from women, like a Japanese Mexican woman and a woman from Ghana, who were saying that some of the artists who were in the auction with them were artists they had learned about in school. And so it meant like this really big honorific to them. So, you know, I know one of your questions is how does Burning Man impact me? And for me, I feel like Burning Man has a mountain of knowledge assets of practice that have benefit and applicability
Hmm.
far beyond the circumference of the 80,000 people that go
Oh
to the Black
yeah.
Rock
Oh
Desert.
yeah.
And I want the broader world to benefit from what burners do and know in their practice, not just the 10 principles, but really, ritual and welcoming the novice and,
Hmm.
not letting not knowing stand in the way of doing and all those good things too.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that just kind of struck out to me, like it just the whole idea of like, oh, maybe you haven't been to Burning Man, but you could still be a burner. Like the whole cacophony idea of just it's like you may already be a member.
Yes, yes. I love that so much.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing is like, I mean, I can understand you hear the name Sotheby's, just like, oh, Burning Man's selling out,
Yeah.
but like you said, it's like there's two sides to like every coin, right? And so it's like, you're giving people from far-flung places who might not have had an opportunity like this. It's like an incredible opportunity of a lifetime, like. So was that the only time that ever happened, or has this been a
Yes, just a
recurring thing?
one-off. And we survived it. People were worried again, like you just said about the sellout and everything,
Uh,
but we survived it. And you also talked about the virtual burn. So I produced the virtual burn in 2020
mm,
for Burning Man, had partnerships with 9 tech partners. We had a new CTO at Burning Man, Stephen Blumenfeld, phenomenal human, and Gloria Beck from the arts team and I and one other person, the four of us produced this together. I was the lead. And uh, one of the things that happened was Burners Without Borders arranged that people who were in refugee camps were able to talk to people from Burning Man. Like they were able to share experiences from totally different contexts and
huh.
educate each other. And then, like one of the partners were their experience was sort of Zoom hopping rooms with graphic interfaces, and they did things like they had a session with a blind photographer explaining how a sense of place and sound and other stimuli um, prompted the photos that he took, and then sighted people describing what they were seeing and other people without sight both hearing the photographer and the sighted people description of the photos. And like, that is a really imaginative way to bring people together. Now,
Yeah.
these very same people also did a hot tub party and had a man shaving his legs with fishnet stockings on. uh, so,
How that
everybody
works.
joined in. Yeah, so the imagination and playfulness across a big wide range, like, or there was a woman who told me that she and her sister had made a pact long ago that they would go to Burning Man and that they had not, but that her sister was dying of cancer in Chicago. And so the way they were going to go to Burning Man together was through the virtual burn.
Ah.
At some point, the question of whether someone's a burner or not becomes irrelevant, right? And it's more
Yeah.
like, how are we connecting? And I think Burning Man, in all its permutations, at heart, makes these really incredible connections.
I mean, I guess you could say it's its own culture, right?
I think it is a cultural movement. Now,
Hmm.
I'm fascinated. I've spent a fair amount of time in the hip hop community. I've spent a fair amount of time in the Cuban rumba and cultural community and so on and so on. And, I also used to live not too far from a racetrack and I've never been to a horse race, but I've been at dawn to when they breeze the horses and they have cheap but wholesome hearty food in the racetrack kitchen for anyone. It's usually like $6 or $8. And, the managers and the trainers and the jockeys are really the only people there. And you can watch and see how much of a culture there is there. So there's lots of spaces, cultural spaces, and the boundaries can be porous in terms of who's inside and who's outside. And yes, there is an absolute culture, and being aware of when you're a visitor to a culture and learning about the norms of that culture and not, presuming that you know what's best or better when you enter into a culture, it's a privilege to participate. And so I don't even know if I'm a burner, but I know that, you know, I've done what I can to be in service to this idea of what is a burner.
Well, I think the whole idea concept has probably evolved over time, right? I mean, in like 1990, when the zone trip number 4 and like 80 people got they come back, and you could probably legitimately say it's like I was one of these 80 people. I mean, it's like we're the few, we're the proud. But now, I'm trying to remember, like we're like doing some numbers, and I think it's somewhere upwards of like 1 million people have been either to Black Rock City or to one of the regionals at least once.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable speculation. I
Yeah.
mean, in 2024, more than 100,000 people went to regional burns. That's more than went to Black Rock City.
Mm-hmm.
And year over year, Burning Man has about 35% new people.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to do that math, and you're just, for sure you hit 1 million pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. And that's just people who've attended, right? I mean, we're talking about like adjacent people. I mean, that could be a couple of times more than that,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So, do you think that I know that for 2020 to raise money, they did the whole Sotheby's auction thing, but it seems like almost like that's an excellent opportunity, for global artists, or to kind of spread the Burning Man ethos or whatever. I mean, any concept of doing that again, or
I don't think, not with Sotheby's, but I don't
yeah,
know because I won't be there.
yeah,
But, I've done projects with the Smithsonian American Art Museum Renwick Gallery. I've done projects with the United States Institute of Peace. I've done projects with Chatsworth House in England, where 556,000 people in 6 months came to see art across a 1,000-acre landscape for free, and none of them really knew what Burning Man was, and they were like, "What is this culture? Where did this come from?" And the artists, four of the works were commissioned, and so one was built with local rock from a quarry and now sits outside the Bjarke Ingels Group headquarters in Copenhagen. Three of the other ones were made with school children and volunteers, and we had a burn on the British landscape, which is really funny because it's so moist there that they just didn't really worry about embercast, And we were all like, "Oh my gosh, you're very casual about your fire." And so there are many ways I've been privileged. The City of San Jose, Office of Cultural Affairs, and others, where people have heard me say this at the office a lot recently because I've been trying to like leave behind, like, if you remember nothing else, remember that the object in and of itself does not convey the culture. It's the people who do. And so all of our partnerships have included sort of activation strategies with volunteer training, with ways to interact with the artwork as one does on
Mhm.
Playa. In Chatsworth, there of the 12 artworks, I can tell you how those pieces connect to the history and mythology of that place. Like, we really think not only about what Burning Man is bringing to the table, but about the
Mhm.
context that we're entering. So I don't, while Burning Man doesn't officially pursue these kinds of things, I would imagine that there will continue to be important opportunities to share and learn with other entities, institutions, and cultural movements. And I think
Mhm.
that's healthy sharing.
Yeah. I mean, not just from Burning Man Project, but also probably like from the regional groups too, like individually.
Yes, a good example of that is in 2017, the Hermitage Museum in Norfolk, Virginia, had an exhibition of Burning Man art and artists. And they got very engaged with the regionals, and then the regionals grew locally. And then they
Mm.
got more money for interactive public art in Norfolk, Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, there's this way that one little spark, speaking of Himbercast, can turn into a bigger engagement in a local area. And you're
Hmm.
right. I think that the regionals and Burners Without Borders are such an important and powerful vehicle in their own context, in their own communities of creating exceptional experiences, really.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of help does the Burning Man project like offer the regionals? Uh, say so like somewhere in Arizona, like, oh, we're going to be part of this like arts festival. We want to do this thing or whatever. I mean, are they? I mean, I'm sure they're not like looking for permission, but I mean, like, what could a help could you guys
Well,
provide?
we have extraordinary humans in that area. Iris Yee is the head of the regional contact network.
Hmm.
Stephen Raspa is a part of the regional event leads team. And then they have some colleagues that work with them. And I think one of the things Burning Man is trying to decipher right now is how to be less centralized around Burning Man project and more capable of creating systems that make for porous, transparent, peer-to-peer engagement.
Hmm.
Because, when Burning Man became a nonprofit and it named its mission as extending the culture from the desert out into the world, I would say that now it's more about facilitate and support. Like the extending has happened,
Hmm.
and there's as much reciprocal benefit between Burning Man Project, the organization, and those regional partners as that goes both ways, right? Like there's as much for the central organization to learn
Hmm.
from the regionals as there is for the central organization to provide service. But there are agreements in place. You do make certain commitments if you become an official regional event. And that includes being a 10 principal event, an all ages event, transparent financials, that kind of thing. And the Burning Man Project team does, along with volunteers, the Regional Events Committee, like they provide conflict resolution support, they provide handbooks and tools for, how to really build an event. They provide mentoring and guidance and support and connection to others, and so this is a moment where Burning Man is reevaluating its role and how the regional system wants to be in relationship to Burning Man Project. So there's been a couple of years of a project called 25 to Thrive, thinking
Hmm.
about there's been a regional system for 25 years. What does another 25 years look like, and how might the whole thing sort of be re-engineered in a way that catches up to where we are now?
Yeah. Yeah, because another thing that's just been flitting across my mind is like there's official like regional network, like regional contacts, like sanctioned events, and then there's kind of I guess like adjacent sort of things, or I guess you could think of things like Love Burn or something where it's like it was official, but now it's not. And I'm sure there's like other groups of people who are like, well, we're just we don't want to be an official thing, but they're still like within the sphere, you
Yeah,
know.
you asked earlier, you said something about is Burning Man a culture? And I think this is a really fascinating moment to look at late 20th century movements and how they're translating into mid 21st century, right? By the time we get 25 years from now and it's 2050, right, we'll be halfway into the 21st century. And the founders and legacy holders of late 20th century movements are unlikely to still be around.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I've watched as, because I've also done years of consulting with the Nonprofit Finance Fund on strategy and um, sustainability with organizations across the country with their boards of directors and executive directors and so on. And, it's not unusual for people to be operating with systems that were built for conditions that no longer exist. So there's this way of reimagining, and I feel that's true in technology, it's true in hip hop, it's true for Burning Man, it's true for the psychedelic science people.
Mm.
Like things are not as they were, 20 years ago, much less 40. And how we all think as leaders moving into, the era we're in and beyond will take thoughtful re-engagement. And I love John Powell, who's the head of the Othering and Belonging Institute, who
Mm.
contends that, which is out of UC Berkeley, by the way, but he contends that most of the world's problems could be tracked back to a sense of othering, making people be the other,
Yeah.
and that most of the world's problems, if not all, could be solved through a practice of belonging. So these questions about are they in or are they out, or official or unofficial, these things may become less relevant as we all find the ways in which we connect and belong, which is really going to be essential for a peaceful world, which I think, if we don't find a way to do that, then we certainly have an existential crisis as a planet.
Oh yeah. Well, I always thought, like, for me personally, and kind of part of the guiding principle of this entire show, like, I always thought, like, the main business of, if we could say business of Burning Man is connection. It's bringing people together through whatever it means, but who are separated by, like, by distance, by time, by culture, but any manner of things that we divide each other with. And you kind of break down those barriers, and we get to, like, the bedrock of, it's like, well, I'm a human being, you're a human being. Like, let's create some art, and let's just connect and be together. And I've always thought that's, like, that's like the great gift that Burning Man can kind of give to the world. And yeah, I mean whatever, like, structures we come up with, like, is it official or not official, or like applying, like, standards. It means, like, yeah, I mean, I think, like, the bedrock behind it all is our connection. You know?
I agree. I also think we have to consider, what I talk about as sort of the balance between risk and trust.
Hmm.
So what puts the culture at risk and needs to be thought about carefully, and what creates trust so we can let go and let our successors carry on, and sort of it's fairly straightforward to enumerate risk associated with financial or even liability. It's harder to enumerate when it comes to culture,
Hmm.
and recently a woman from the Modern Elder Academy last year was talking about years ago when she worked in a restaurant and they had a uniform t-shirt, but they had liberty in terms of how they might tear or cut or embellish the t-shirt and what they might wear it with. And it was this sense of camaraderie and team around this freedom with their t-shirt, that when a new owner took over the restaurant and made them all wear the t-shirt in exactly the same conforming way, eroded the sense of camaraderie and common culture across the staff. Now, who would have thought that t-shirts made all the difference in how something runs? And so these are the things, like when you think about Burning Man, it's often proudly announced the way we do the perimeter fence with people still pounding stakes when there are machines that could go around and just, pound the shakes stakes
Yeah.
with much less human effort required. But then you lose the team sense of
Ah,
building this perimeter fence together, which sets a tone for what comes after. So
yeah.
this is it's less important who's in or who's out, and more important to understand the practices we want to preserve without getting locked and rigid around it,
Hmm.
but the things that we know will help this opportunity to connect carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. All right. So where does this all begin for you? Like, where did you grow up? We said you have you always lived in the Bay Area? Is that where you grew up?
I am the daughter of a geophysicist who was a woman in Clovis, California, who got accepted to Stanford out of high school. And her father said that good girls from small towns don't go away. So instead, she
Ah.
got married to my father and had two babies at 19 and 21 and was an art major and a French horn player and a mother before she realized that she was married to an alcoholic and she was unhappy. And she left her small town with a U-Haul, her two daughters, and moved to Berkeley and enrolled in physics because she'd been reading
Hmm.
um, Scientific American, I think, magazine and thought physics seemed interesting. And then she eventually did her PhD there and then a 5-year postdoc at Caltech. And then she moved to Santa Cruz and founded the Charles Richter Laboratory. So I
Oh.
grew up in this really interesting, culturally diverse community of young students from UC Berkeley, anti-war protests, and food cooperatives like the Food Conspiracy. You know, I was around when the cheese board first started.
What's that?
Uh, oh, it's in North Berkeley. You'll have to check it out sometime.
Cheese
And
board.
it's a fresh bread and lots of cheese and
Oh,
pizza now, actually.
I like it.
Um, and so the it was a very dynamic. And actually, I wrote a book, if you don't mind me telling you.
Oh, of course.
Um, I'll show you the cover. It's called What Remains Is Love, 55 Letters to My Mother. And this is a photo of my mom and my sister and me on the front of
Oh.
it. And, you know, I grew up with this really incredible dichotomy between this mother who was incredibly intellectual, incredibly, creative and interested in an international sensibility and would take us to hear organ concerts at the, Palace of American or the Palace of Fine
Right.
Arts. And at the other hand, she was unavailable. Our house was really chaotic. There was some violence and some other less nurturing elements. And so my sister and I both had this really passionate relationship with our mother that was difficult, but it also pushed me out into the world. So, I was always a little dancer and I loved the rhythm and the beat and and so I had a neighbor she was East African, but she was a West African dancer. My
Hmm.
auntie Nyambura, I learned to dance with her.
Huh.
And then my neighbor Donna became a belly dancer training with this woman who was really well regarded in the belly dance world. And, then that took me to the drums, which took me to Sproul Plaza, where these incredible drummers like Bill Summers and John Santos and others were, Tabaji and Butch Haynes were like playing like really great drummers. Like a lot of times now you go and it's just people kind of beating on drums. But back then
Hmm.
it was like Piero Ornelas, like really phenomenal.
Hmm.
Um, Johnny Otis, who's the son of a famous jazz musician, like really incredible people. And I started learning to like clap clave and dance rumba to the drums and, and so on and so on and so on, right? Like it was one incredible exploration. And because my home environment was unstable, the geography of the Bay Area became the parent in a way for me. Like it became where my attachment was.
Hmm.
And where I got my nurturing was largely in African diasporic community. And, red beans and rice, and if it was Puerto Ricans, black beans. But yeah, and so while I have a creative practice as a writer, a showmaker, a festival generator, creator, and so on, I also got to a place where I knew I needed to learn more about access to capital and how the economics of the cultural sector worked, given that our cultural assets were so rich and our, you know, organizations for the most part were so destitute.
Hmm.
So, I did a lot of things to develop my acumen in that area, a fellowship at the Kennedy Center for 10 months in strategic management, classes in financial accounting, and so on and so on. And that led me to working for the Nonprofit Finance Fund and doing a lot of work in the arts and culture sector around sustainability. So I have this
Oh.
sort of, two sides to me, the side of me that loves to be a cultural strategist and to think about how we incorporate aesthetics and kinesthetics and somatic experience into the world around us to make a kinder, gentler, more beautiful and good for our nervous system world, and
Hmm.
to support a broad sense of, what is an artist? This is probably back to that a burner, not a burner. I don't
Hmm.
so much care about those questions. An artist, not an artist,
Hmm.
like a creative, an innovator, a community, enabler. Like it's like really important that we maintain humanity in public spaces. And I think that happens a lot through art and cultural practice. And then the other part of me that also wants to dance for you or make a show or write a book. And so I try to navigate both sides of that. And you started off by saying that I retired from Burning Man. And I don't really use the word retired at all. Like, I don't ever expect to stop working. I
Hey.
did have to step away from Burning Man because I felt there was more for me and more to learn and ways to grow. And now I'll find out what that's going to be.
Yeah, I was actually gonna one of the questions on top of mind was like, yeah, what now? Like, what are your thoughts? What are your plans or dreams?
Well, one is to trust that the future will unfold, right? It'll
Hmm.
it'll become clear because Burning Man is so immersive, as they might say, right?
Hmm.
Like it's so all-encompassing that I finally realized that I needed to make space in my life in order to find out what was next in my life and to be the person that I am now and be curious about what's ahead because I had life-threatening cancer in 2023,
Oh.
tumor in my brain, and I was very like, I love my life. I want to go back to my life. I don't want to be changed by cancer. That's a cliche, but it does change you. It really
Yeah.
does.
Oh yeah.
Changes everything,
Hmm.
including really teaching me to let love in even further because people rose up, 20 people came and stayed with me when
Oh.
I had to go for treatment away from home
Uh-huh.
on rotation to help me make my bed or go to the doctor or try to eat something or bring me a little art project. My
Yeah, yeah,
friend
yeah.
Brody Scotland, who works at Burning Man in the art department, she would come over and she would bring me like, here's some clay. What would you like to make with clay? And I could do it for about 10 minutes and then I had to go lay down for about
Hmm.
45 minutes and then I would get up for 10 minutes. So my sense of love, my sense of my inner self, my sense of gratitude, but also a sense of really changed person. I need to spend some time with that human and
Hmm.
how can what I am able to do and who I am now be useful in the cultural sector that I love so much.
Hmm.
The very first thing I'm doing is I'm going to Sweden for 3 weeks and I'm spending a
Ah.
week in the circus community there. I'm spending a week in the forest with some sculptors. And then I'm spending a couple days in a small town on a river where somebody I know is directing an opera. So I'm really taking myself out of my day to day to reset in the cold and beautiful landscape of Sweden.
Are you gonna
So
go there
that'll be
like now? We're recording this on January 31st. I was thinking it's like, oh, maybe springtime or
no, no, I'm leaving on February 8th.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I have a certificate in circus dramaturgy from the French and Belgian National Circus Schools.
Oh,
So I really love making shows. I really love making shows. And so I think, 8 days seeing circus shows and talking to circus professionals will
yeah.
be a really good nourishing experience. And then Christina Sperong and Christian Ristow are actually artists I know through Burning Man that are
Hmm.
sculptors that moved from Taos, New Mexico to Lund, Sweden, just outside of Malmo a few years ago. And so they've renovated a farmhouse and outbuildings and they weld and forge and sculpt and do their thing.
Hmm.
And their son Kodiak, who must be 12, I think, by now, does also all those things.
Oh.
And one day somebody asked him the difference between welding and forging, and he got this really scoffing look on his face, like, "Are you an idiot? These things are very different." He was like 10 or 8 or something like that. So, but I'll have some quiet and some beauty around me. And I love that. I love
Hmm.
that. So, and then, if a friend, even a new friend, is directing an opera, I think a person should go and see it. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah. It'll
Ah.
be all in Swedish, but then who understands opera anyway?
Well, it's all beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah. Wonder if Diva Marisa can sing in Swedish. Hmm. I don't know.
Yeah,
She's
and then I
beautiful
have
voice,
a
man.
I have another book coming out that later this spring about recovery called
Oh,
Left Foot, Right Foot. And then I've been working with an incredible street dancer, choreographer named Lorenzo Harris, usually referred to as Rennie out of Philadelphia. And it's his autobiography, but it's also a history of street dance and hip hop. Um, he was on the first Run DMC Fresh Fest tour as a
oh,
dancer in the way back. He has 2 honorary PhDs. He choreographs for Ailey. And so I'm working with him to complete his book and get that out this year as well. And then we'll see what I know. So many wonderful people. I can only imagine what kind of serendipity and synergy is ahead for me.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think it's unique to the Burning Man world, but it's just kind of like this idea of just sort of throwing yourself like off that cliff or just like into the cultural stream and just be like, let's see where it takes me, and it just, I don't know. I mean, like, I would have very little fear, right? Because it's just like, I mean, I've made connections and I have friends, and it's like, there's like waypoints along the way. It's like, oh, I'm going to stay with so and so, and it's like, wow,
I have a healthy
that's incredible.
regard for the risk involved,
Well, yeah,
but
risk and trust, right? Yeah.
yeah, I know the period of time that my savings will be, you know, what I can fall back on and when I should start to really be concerned. And we'll just, yes, but I've often said that I don't know if I'm Icarus or the daring lady on the flying trapeze. But as
Mm,
it turns out, the Icarus myth has never happened to me. And even when something approximating that has happened, I have found the lessons and the learnings and the growing
exactly.
to serve me.
Hmm.
And so my friend Scott down in New Orleans, who used to be the head of the cultural economy there with Mitch Landrew. I don't remember Scott's last name right. Scott Hutchison. He said to me once that we know we are resilient. So whatever happens, we know we will be okay.
Hmm.
And so I think if we're not
Yeah, I like that.
overly defined by how we think success or life looks like, we can be all right taking those flights off of cliffs without quite knowing if we can fly.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And if we don't, then something can calcify and become less than healthy. In my case, I have to make room for growth and
Hmm.
learning.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't want to get set in your ways, ossified. I mean, it's kind of a well, not unique to Burning Man, but like, yeah, take some risks, evolve, try something new, radical self-expression, right? I mean, it's yeah. So Yeah. So how has Burning Man impacted you and influenced you? Because you said like you first became aware of it like in the mid to late '90s, but then your first trip to the play was what 2015, and that's a good long year of like percolating around.
I love Burning Man, and I would say there are simple ways that Burning Man has impacted me that seem small or trivial, but when I travel, I have a flashlight.
Huh.
It's that talk about radical self-reliance. If you're in an unfamiliar place and you're out after dark, and you need to see your way or need to see the keypad on your Airbnb door lock or whatever, it's just good to have it. In the back of my car, I have scissors, duct tape, and toilet paper along with the normal, uh, air tire pressure thing or whatever. Because once I had my car broken into and I cut up a yoga mat and used some duct tape to seal it up until I could get it fixed. So there's
Oh.
this way that we
Huh.
have small habits that I think come from the preparation for playa, that translate over into other ways of being that just are about preparation. My attraction to working for Burning Man was as much about my many years in grassroots community and wanting to understand, like, how do these epic things get built in the desert? Like, what is going on there? Or if the tech community truly is there and all these entrepreneurs, what will a new wave of philanthropy look like when, the entrepreneurs expect social entrepreneurism and healthy measures of success and are not necessarily going to be philanthropic in the ways that were done in the past. And so, how might I observe that, which didn't turn out, I didn't meet rich people, so too bad for me on that one. But, or if I did, that's not the point, right? That's
Yeah.
not right. But I was attracted to this idea that Burning Man had cultivated practice inside of a mostly tight bubble that maybe could benefit others. And so what I found is that there were many ways that my natural way of being was in harmony with what, you know, burners do
Hmm.
and are and be, which is funny because again, we get to that, are you or aren't you a burner? Are you inside or outside? And the Cacophony Society, you may
Hmm.
already be a member.
Yeah.
So, witnessing the ways in which Burning Man observes a threshold, which is a really important concept to me. Like,
Hmm.
we may refer to this liminal space, but like, for example, when I was really sick, my sister would come over and she'd be like, okay, what do you need? Do you need your dishes done, your trash taken? Blah, blah, blah. And that was way too much for me. I was like, could you just sit down and hold my hand for a little bit before you do the stuff? So that's a threshold moment, right? Like when you shift from where you were to where you're headed with a kind of acknowledgement that you're crossing through a portal. And Burning Man does that with greeters, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the value of ritual, which is, of course, like as long as humans have been doing stuff, they've been building ritual practice. And so you look at the lamplighters and those kinds of things. Or, if I go to an alcoholic, ooh, if I go to a recovery meeting and I acknowledge out loud that, like, I am whatever, the
Hmm.
whatever, this is a form of ritual acknowledgement. And so, you know, and then this really splendid thing that you already referred to earlier is that anyone can create. So you get people who come out to the desert and do not identify themselves as artists at all, but they will go back and think up something they're going to bring next year,
Yeah.
and for some people, that's a gumball machine. Like a really, really cute artwork from about probably 6 or 7, maybe more years ago was called In Case a Uke, and it was like a sort of facsimile of one of those things that you see in office buildings, like in case of fire, break, in case of emergency, break and take out the axe or the foam or whatever, fire retardant. And in this case, it looked like one of those things, but you could get in it and take out a ukulele. So it's like in case of emergency, you can play a ukulele. So, this kind of another word I've really come to use a lot lately, porosity, this porous membrane, this
Mm.
way in which you can flow in and out of spaces and make something whimsical or, you know, one year there was an artist named Dan Sullivan who had this really ambitious project, and he didn't get it really completed and built. I think it was called Catacomb of Veils, but I don't know for sure until maybe Wednesday or Thursday of the event, I think Thursday. And then it had to burn sort of the next day or something like that. And one could say, like, oh, he failed because he didn't get it done at the start of the event and then he had to burn it, blah, blah, blah. He didn't do all the things he hoped he would do. Except if you went to any of the team dinners when they were building this thing, if you went any time to that build site, there was so much camaraderie and so much goodwill because of the way Dan leads and facilitates a community that I don't think the art had anything to do with it except as a device for bringing people. I mean, it did have something to do with it, and I loved it,
Mhm.
and I'm glad that he did get it
So
done
like the art wasn't really the finished product, but like the process to get there.
precisely.
Yeah.
And so Burning Man's impact around process over product is profound.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I just coming up with this whole idea of like Burning Man and like I know people keep thinking of like, oh, what is a burner, what is not a burner. It's like that's kind of like an exclusionary kind of idea. Like I don't know. I think it's just like the DNA of Burning Man is more just inclusive, like the whole like cacophony idea of like you may already be a member. It's like let's start with the presumption that you are a member.
Yes,
you know, and then you
yes,
can always take yourself out if it's not agreeable to you, you
yes.
know.
If you ask yourself if you're a burner, you probably are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Anything else? Let's see. I think we hit all the questions. So you had a book that you wrote about your mom. So what remains is love, 55 letters to my mom. And then you have another book coming out, Left Foot, Right Foot.
Yes.
Uh have
And
you
the 55 letters to my mother wouldn't speak to me when she died. And
what?
so there was a lot of grief to work through. And then about 5 years later, I was like, oh, my mom is inside of me. She can't leave or not leave me. She's a part of who I am. And I see her everywhere. So I started writing her letters like I was running into her. And then when I finished the letters, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good writing. And so I found an editor and a book designer and I dug up a bunch of old photos and I rearranged the letters a little bit from the order I wrote them in. And it's a book about Berkeley in the late 60s and 70s. It's a book
Mhm.
about mothers and daughters. It's a book about intergenerational trauma because I say, my grandfather beat my grandmother and my mother beat me. But my
Hmm.
grandfather was also raised by someone that people called the meanest man in town. And he came from Denmark in 1899, broke horses for the cable cars when horses pulled the cable cars in San Francisco, won some money in a poker game, came to the Central Valley and started farming with his wife and his mother. So he probably didn't have it that easy either. So it's like the book really is this loving book. That's why What Remains is Love. It's not me working out my garbage, it's me sharing the treasure
Hmm.
that awareness and empathy brings with time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, something always emerges, from any kind of conflagration or fire. There's always something to take away with.
And isn't that so potent about Burning Man as well, right? It points to the ephemerality of things and the lasting result of things. Like the first year I went out to Playa as a worker, of course, as a worker, you go out quite early. There's really nothing out on the desert, one or two things or whatever. And my friend Megan Miller started pointing to, there's this, there's that, there's this, and there was nothing there. But she had been going for so long that her place memory, the poetics of that space were as alive for her as if the structures were there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think Burning Man, a part of its gift is it creates somewhere out of nowhere, and that lives on inside of us, and we can tolerate the change and the ephemerality because it still resides within us.
Oh yeah, and kind of like when I was talking about the whole graduated thing, I mean, people come to Burning Man, they learn these lessons and take them into the outside world, and it's like it's not the end. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a minority of people who look at it as something like, oh, I'm going to this festival, like one and done, chop like that off the bucket list, whatever. But
Now, I've heard people say the first year I went to Burning Man and the second year I did Burning Man. Like I helped make it. Like you don't want to just go, you want to be a part of it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people, yeah, who think of it as just like a destination or a thing to do or a thing to check off, and then they get there and they're like, oh, this is what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, about an hour and 10 minutes now. Anything else? Any final thoughts or
No, I just
plugs? Or...
appreciate your thoughtful curiosity and warm welcome. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, the whole concept of my show is, and part of it is like, I've known a number of people through the Burning Man world over the years, but it's like I've just not really known their backstory. Just you'd like meet someone on the playa and you hang out with them, and you're like, oh, you're so close, and like you might not see them for the rest of the year, but you see them for like a week, like once a year, and then but it's like, well, I know nothing about. you know,
Which means you know everything that's important about them.
yeah, yeah, but also like as Burning Man's what like 40 years old now
Yep.
or something, right? Right,
And
and
humans are fascinating.
oh yeah, 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 and it's just it's like we're all kind of getting older, and I mean there's always a new group of 20, 30 somethings kind of coming in, and um I don't know, and then like some people like trying to remember someone who just like recently passed away, his name I forget now, the lighting guy you're talking
Yeah,
about,
Opa.
Opa, yeah, 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 and then also
Decades.
yeah, like Kamikaze Kelly. I know, like he this whole thing, like has like lung cancer and he's gonna pass away soon. And I was like, I tried to get a hold of him. I was like, oh, let's just do an interview, but I don't know, he's occupied. Um, but just to record some of these stories before it's too late for some people, but also just for every, like, there is no one story of Brady Man. Like everyone has like a different facet or a piece of the pie, like, I don't know. It's what it's all about, you know.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. The more reviews the show has, the more likely it will even appear in search results. Also, please tell a friend and share this show with anyone that you think might like it. Word of mouth reaches quite far, especially in the Burning Man community. If you would like to contact us, please send an email to shadowofthemanpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, X, and YouTube. The links for all of these are available at shadowoftheman.com. Feel free to use any of these social media accounts to provide any feedback you might have. Your thoughts on the show are greatly appreciated. Thank you, and see you soon for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.